Believe it or not, Pennsylvania Avenue is astronomically oriented to the heliacal rising of Sirius. The ancient Egyptians based their calendar on this phenomenon, which is the day when Isis's star Sirius is visible on the horizon just before sunrise. From the White House in early August, Sirius is visible a few minutes before sunrise, directly behind the Capitol building. From the perspective of the Capitol building, sunset on this same day passes straight down Pennsylvania Avenue and sets over the apex of the pyramid atop the National Post Office. If you overlay a pair of pentagrams over the Capitol building, a couple of interesting things occur. These edges follow Pennsylvania and Maryland Avenues, and RFK Stadium from 1961 is framed perfectly in the crook of the opposing pentagram. I noticed 4 radiating streets above and below the Capitol building. Then it clicked with the pentagrams, and I see what is actually depicted here is the Templar cross. Can there now be any doubt who is behind the program of symbolism in D.C.? The Templars may be long gone, but the Scottish Freemasons remain active today. We'll learn more about the Templars at Chartres Cathedral, and again in London. David Oveson's groundbreaking book, The Secret Architecture of Our Nation's Capital, reveals that D.C. has more zodiacs than any city in the world, concentrated in what is called the Federal Triangle. The Federal Triangle contains many important governmental structures, including the National Archives, the National Post Office, the Departments of Justice and Commerce, and so on. Most importantly, Oveson shows how these Federal Triangle zodiacs draw attention to one constellation in particular, Virgo. Virgo the Virgin is an esoteric representation of Isis. Oveson's research into Masonic symbolism led him to map the stars Arcturus, Regulus, and Spica to a terrestrial triangle connecting the White House, Capitol building, and the point where many think the Washington Monument was supposed to be. You see, the Washington Monument is shifted slightly to the east with respect to the White House Jefferson Memorial north-south axis. Some claim this shift was due to the fact that the marked point is on landfill, and the site where the monument was actually built is on solid ground. In any case, here is that particular stellar arrangement brought down to Earth. We see Virgo over the Federal Triangle and Leo over the Capitol building. 18th century Masonic French astronomer Jérôme Lalande wrote, "The Virgin is consecrated to Isis, just as Leo is consecrated to her husband Osiris." So Isis is linked with the Federal Triangle and Osiris with the Capitol building. The Virgin's right hand points to the White House, but her left hand is actually on the Washington Monument. This is very interesting to those who know the Isis story. Could Isis be holding Osiris's golden phallus in the form of the Washington Monument? As the ancient Egyptian story goes, it all started when Set became jealous of his brother Osiris, who was king of all Egypt, and whose girlfriend was the beautiful Isis. Set then deceived and killed Osiris, cut his body into 14 parts, sealed all but one of them in a coffin, and sent it down the Nile. As a final insult, he tossed Osiris's penis into the river. His sister consort Isis was at length able to recover and magically reconnect all of Osiris's parts, except for his penis, which was unfortunately eaten by a fish. Isis fashioned a golden phallus, attached it to Osiris, and brought him back to life with a song. From this experience, the resurrected Osiris became Lord of the Dead. Isis was impregnated with the golden phallus, and their son Horus grew to become god of the sun. It's the original story of sex and violence, jealousy, incest, and pregnancy. The Washington Monument is an obvious phallic symbol. The Vesica Pisces paths surrounding the obelisk suggest female genitals. Taken together, the symbols represent the joining of Osiris and Isis and the conception of the sun god Horus. Now maybe you think I'm going too far at this point, but take a look at what is above the elevator that goes up the shaft of the Washington Monument, the same ride Robert Langdon took at the end of the lost symbol. Right above the elevator doors there is a bronze sculpture of George Washington, sculpted by French Freemason Houdon, and above that is the winged disc of Horus. What in the world does this Egyptian solar symbol have to do with America? It's a clue to the secret meaning of the obelisk, in the most public of places, but how many actually see it and understand? The dimensions of the monument are all 6s and 5s. What an amazing coincidence that 6,660 inches equals 555 feet. We'll decipher the meaning of 6s and 5s in Egypt. The Washington Monument is not a true obelisk cut from a single piece of stone. Instead, it is both literally and figuratively a monumental work of masonry. Bernard I. Peache's meticulous metrological study of the Washington Monument reveals a sacred diagram projected on the earth. Based on the exact height and angle of the pyramidion, its face and ridge lines project down to the ground and trace circles that are proportioned ad quadratum with respect to each other. The diagram shown here is called the octagram star in mathematics. It's a symbol used in many religions and cultures around the world. I'll briefly trace the octagram star through history to uncover its meaning. The earliest example I've found that has this symmetry is the Star of Inanna, the Sumerian goddess whom I think all the Isis obsession is ultimately based on. Archaeologists identify the Sumerian culture as the oldest civilization on Earth. Sumeria predated ancient Egypt, but it wasn't even discovered until 1890, so that must be why most esoteric references are to Isis rather than Inanna. I highly recommend reading the collective works of Zecharia Sitchin for an alternative, albeit controversial theory on the origins of civilization, but that's another documentary entirely. I have found the octagram star in many other places around the world. The Hindu Star of Lakshmi is a pure octagram star. The Egyptian Ogdoad adds a central cosmic egg to the mix, containing the sun god Ra. The structure of the Celtic calendar resonates with the octagram star. The Gnostic theologian Valentius transformed Egyptian concepts into Christian ones in his 2nd century cosmology featuring the pleroma, or Godhead, in the center. The Buddhist Wheel of Dharma has this as its symbol, incorporating the Eightfold Path. Islam uses the Rub el-Hizb as its symbol. Found in the oldest Korans as a chapter marker, here it is expressed fractally in Muhammad's tomb in Medina. The Eastern Orthodox Church used octagram star symmetry in numerous depictions of Christ Pantocrator and in the Transfiguration. Even the seemingly unrelated Aztec culture produced their calendrical Piedra del Sol having this remarkable symmetry. Finally, the Vatican also encoded this powerful symbol in St. Peter's Square. The ancient Egyptian obelisk at its center is literally a gigantic sundial, with stones in the pavement marking the seasons. So the octagram star is resoundingly a solar symbol, appropriately fitting the male obelisk, which is the primary reading of the Washington Monument. However, female energy is not entirely neglected in the Washington Monument. We've already seen how a stretched Vesica Pisces symbol surrounds the obelisk. Rick Campbell has brought something even more hidden to light. If you draw Vesica Pisces to scale, with the circle's diameters equal to the height of the Washington Monument's 555 feet, the Great Pyramid of Egypt fits perfectly inside the vulva. This is no accident. The architect who designed the Washington Monument must have wanted to secretly link it with the Great Pyramid. The Great Pyramid and the Washington Monument both have phi in their proportions, which is one of the most interesting numbers in mathematics. The last thing I noticed in Washington, D.C. propelled me on a virtual journey around the world. Remember the pair of interlocking triangles surrounding the White House? It struck me that the horseshoe-shaped lawn in the White House backyard looked a lot like the bluestone ring at Stonehenge. That got me thinking how these two triangles together form a 5 by 12 rectangle that has the same proportions as the station rectangle at Stonehenge. Following this hunch, I drew a line from the tip of the federal triangle to the center of Stonehenge. Later on, I happened to zoom into New York City when this layer was on, and saw that the alignment perfectly bisects Central Park. That's probably not an accident, so here we go. The angle that this large-scale alignment takes through Central Park matches the interlocking Pythagorean triangle's hypotenuses. 4 such triangles match Central Park's proportions of 5 to 24 precisely. I then wondered, what is this unusual aqueduct doing just under the surface of Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis Reservoir? It seems to mirror the triangle's hypotenuse angle. That's certainly odd, but in my research I've learned to follow so-called coincidences wherever they lead. The aqueduct leads us to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Getting closer still, we see this variation of the Templar flag in the atrium of the Robert Lehman collection. Incidentally, Albrecht Dürer's esoteric masterpiece, Melancholia I, is in this collection, and we'll study it in Egypt. In case you're thinking I'm imagining connections where none exist, right outside this room is one of the oldest artifacts in North America, a 3,500-year-old Egyptian obelisk from Heliopolis. Note the octagon surrounding yet another solar symbol. There are only a handful of ancient Egyptian obelisks left in the world, even counting those still in Egypt. So when I see one, I sit up and take notice. This obelisk is the twin of Cleopatra's Needle in London. Egyptian temples typically had paired obelisks at their entrances, so the obelisks now in New York and London used to together frame the entrance to a temple in Heliopolis. It was quite a difficult and expensive project in the 19th century, and even today, to transport a 224-ton slab of granite halfway across the planet. Connecting nations with ancient Egypt was apparently a very powerful motivator to the Freemasons who bothered moving these obelisks. Overlaying the floor plan, we see what the aqueduct is pointing to. Literally an ancient Egyptian temple within the Sackler wing of the Met. The Temple of Dendur had to be removed from its original site in order to save it from being submerged by the construction of the Aswan High Dam. In 1965, the government of Egypt presented the temple as a gift to the United States, which was ceremonially represented by Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. That's quite a coincidence, considering the aqueduct in Jackie's reservoir led us to the very temple she received. Was the former First Lady playing the role of Isis? While we're in New York, let's take a look at one of the most famous tourist spots and greatest symbols of America, and visit the Statue of Liberty. The authors Graham Hancock and Robert Bivall have researched the Statue of Liberty, and you might be surprised what they have found. French sculptor and well-known Freemason Bartholdi designed the colossal statue originally for the opening of the Suez Canal in 1867. Fellow Freemason Gustave Eiffel, who was later made famous for his Parisian Tower, was commissioned as the statue's engineer. It is said Bartholdi modeled the sculpture after the Roman goddess Libertas. The truth is, Libertas was an echo of the Egyptian goddess Isis. After Bartholdi's Colossus was rejected for the Suez Canal due to financial reasons, he repurposed it as the Statue of Liberty for New York Harbor. It comes as no surprise that the cornerstone for the Statue of Liberty was laid in a Masonic ceremony. Researcher Jim Allison has connected the dots and identified the triangle between Giza, Pharos, and the opening of the Suez Canal. The angle of this triangle matches the slope of the Great Pyramid and looks like the Greek letter delta, which beautifully echoes the Nile Delta. The Colossus of Rhodes was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The giant statue that stood on the island of Rhodes depicted Apollo, god of the sun. who also wore a crown of 7 rays. 7 rays is very interesting in light of the culmination of the initiation ceremony into the cult of Isis. According to 19th century author Edward Schur, after a successful initiate survived all the harrowing tests and triumphed over death by fire, water, and temptation of the senses, he was led into an inner sanctum, where he looked upon a colossal metal statue of Isis, crowned with a diadem of 7 rays. I believe 7 is Isis's secret number. Isis's son Horus was god of the sun, just as Apollo depicted in the Colossus of Rhodes was god of the sun to the Greeks. You'll see that the Statue of Liberty's base star is quite odd, having 11 points. I think this was done to make the number symbolism in the Statue of Liberty fit an important Egyptian structure, the Great Pyramid of Giza, whose height to base proportion is 7 to 11, like the famous convenience store's name. And if you didn't get 11 from the base star, the height of the statue from heel to top of head is 111 feet, 1 inch. So it all fits now. You see how the Statue of Liberty secretly depicts the Egyptian goddess Isis. Extending the line of the submerged structure in the reservoir that led us to the Temple of Isis all the way to the East River, we are directed to the United Nations headquarters in Midtown Manhattan. The iconic Secretariat's building proportions are based on phi. As you know, this proportion links the structure with the Washington Monument and the Great Pyramid. Did you know the 69,000 square meter site of UN headquarters is considered international territory and is technically not a part of New York City? The UN headquarters has its own security force, fire department, and postal administration that even issues its own stamps. The notion of UN headquarters being a city within a city reminds me of how the Vatican is also a city within Rome. I like to refer to this as a nested city or fractal structure. I was fascinated to discover that the Italian government donated an Arnaldo Pomodoro sphere-within-sphere sculpture to the UN in 1991. The golden ball beautifully represents the concept of a city within a city. The internal structures seem to me like buildings and streets on the inner surfaces of the spheres. I'm intrigued because I've seen 3 other similar sculptures in locations significant to my research. Pomodoro made a series of 6 spheres within spheres scattered around the world. Significant sphere-within-sphere locations are the Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden in D.C., very close to the Capitol building, the De Young Museum in San Francisco, and in the Vatican's courtyard of the Belvedere. We'll be visiting the latter 2 locations in due course. The Security Council Chamber is the emergency room of the UN, where decisions involving economic sanctions and military action are sometimes made. Notice the horseshoe-shaped desk surrounding 13 chairs located at a rectangular table in the center. The red chairs flanking the central group are arranged in rows of 13. All these lucky 13s are reminiscent of the many 13s on the Great Seal of the United States. The mural in the Security Council chamber is by Norwegian artist Per Krogh, and it contains some highly interesting symbolism. The left arched panel shows a woman opening a window, letting in rays of golden sunlight. The right arched panel shows a man letting a white horse run before the full moon. Sun and moon are symbolized in Masonic lodges by the columns Boaz on the left and Jachin on the right. Boaz and Jachin originally stood in Solomon's temple in Jerusalem. Boaz symbolizes the sun and Jachin the moon. We'll see the symbolism again in the towers of sun and moon at Chartres Cathedral. The Vesica Pisces shape in the center of the mural contains the story of original sin. Young Adam and Eve stand in the background. Lucifer, hanging from serpentine vines in the tree of knowledge, hands Eve the infamous apple. Years pass, and Adam and Eve are shown with arms interlocked, closer to the center of the Vesica Pisces. In time, their firstborn Cain is shown in the foreground at his parents' feet. This unmistakable imagery is strange to say the least in a chamber representing all the nations of the world. The mural symbolizing the security of all nations should probably embrace all cultures and religions, but it clearly has a distinctly Judeo-Christian subtext. You have to look closely to perceive it, but there is a faint circle representing the sun surrounding the Vesica Piscis. Tiny flames can be seen emanating from this circle, which carry through 4 of the mural's panels. Here the sun, or sun, emerges from the center of the Vesica Piscis, or womb. The bird below the Vesica Piscis is a phoenix, standing over the ashes of its parent. The phoenix is a symbol of transformation and of the cyclical nature of time. Herodotus recorded the fact that this mysterious bird has ancient Egyptian provenance. There is a sacred bird called the phoenix. I have never seen it myself except in pictures, for it is extremely rare, only appearing, according to the people of Heliopolis, once in 500 years, when it is seen after the death of its parent. The beast of war is shown slain in an underground crypt, run through with a sword. The abandoned artillery, machine gun, and soldier laying down his rifle show this is the end of the Second World War. The UN was chartered at the end of this conflict in 1945, and therefore the war imagery is entirely appropriate. Souls, or shades in between life and death, literally in monochrome, are being helped up from below on both sides of the mural. Shades on the solar left side are tinted gold, and shades on the lunar right side are appropriately tinted silver. The original motto of the French Revolution, Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité, or La Mort, liberty, equality, brotherhood, or death, surprisingly maps to much of the remaining symbolism. Souls being lifted with ropes up into the light are gaining their liberty. The scene in the upper left shows a group of people weighing grain, presumably to distribute it with equality. The party in the 2 panels surrounding the Vesica Piscis illustrates brotherhood, with all types of people and children happily united holding cyan ribbons and UN flags. Those souls who died in the war are lining up and entering the starry door of death behind the phoenix. La Mort was later dropped from the revolutionary motto because it reminded people too much of the Reign of Terror. The tricolor flag of the French Republic symbolizes the 3-term motto, Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité. The scene in the upper right shows scientists investigating the macrocosm and microcosm with telescope and microscope. The 2 upper panels hold a political message, with the depiction of people painting, planting, designing, playing music, singing, writing, and dancing. I think the implication is humanity may enjoy these higher pleasures after war has been transformed like a phoenix into peace through the agency of the United Nations. The symbolism in the mural contains Judeo-Christian, Masonic, French Revolutionary, and ancient Egyptian imagery that became apparent only under careful analysis. The mural is more than a small decorative element. It dominates the Security Council chamber. Therefore, I think the choice of symbolism embedded in the mural tells us something about the character of the United Nations itself. I find the hidden connections to Masons and Egypt most provocative. Contemplating the United Nations got me thinking about national symbols. Consider the UN flag as a symbol of nations coming together in peace. As I already mentioned, the map is divided into 33 sectors. It seems appropriate that the Earth is flanked by 2 olive branches symbolizing peace. Each of these branches contains 13 leaves. The UN flag is cyan in color and was created after the UN was chartered in 1945. In 1947, the UN decided to partition Palestine into a Jewish state, an Arab state, and a UN-administered Jerusalem. This decision led to a series of wars, and ultimately Israel's independence in 1948. The coat of arms of Israel is also cyan in color. It seems appropriate that the menorah is featured, because it's been a symbol of Judaism for almost 3,000 years. The menorah is flanked by two 13-leafed olive branches symbolizing peace, another parallel with the UN flag. There are many countries whose flags and coats of arms feature olive branches symbolizing peace. However, only the UN emblem and the coats of arms of Israel, the United States, and the U.S. Virgin Islands feature olive branches having exactly 13 leaves. The U.S. Virgin Islands coat of arms is a modified version of the Great Seal of the United States. The flag of the United States of America also features significant numerical symbolism. There are 13 red and white stripes. 50 stars are arranged in 9 rows, alternating between rows of 6 and 5 stars. We'll learn the significance of the 9 rows in San Francisco and the alternating rows of 6 and 5 stars in Egypt. Picking up the alignment that started at the tip of the Federal Triangle in D.C., through New York City's Central Park, to its endpoint at the center of Stonehenge, we are wondering, why would the Founding Fathers in D.C. and city planners in New York City conspire to link their fair cities with this ancient temple? The reason is simple. Stonehenge is at the heart of the mystery. Let's take a closer look. The first monument at the site was begun during the Neolithic period, around 3,100 years before the Common Era, and Stonehenge was completed during the Bronze Age, approximately 4,500 years ago. Here's a reconstruction of Stonehenge Phase 3 at its height, showing the sarsen ring with its stone lintels, huge trilithons, and smaller bluestones. The larger Aubrey circle is a ring of 56 holes, accommodating 4 standing station stones. Connecting the station stones, we see what researchers call the station rectangle. The amazing thing is it has precisely the same 5:12 proportion as we've already seen in D.C. and New York City. Now we see where this proportion comes from, as this is surely the oldest known example. The astronomer Gerald Hawkins has shown how the station rectangle encodes specific astronomical phenomena, including cycles of Earth, Moon, and Sun, commemorated by important festivals in the Celtic calendar. Stuckley, one of the founders of the field of archaeology in the 18th century, whose great work was studying Stonehenge, claimed that Freemasonry was a legacy of the Druids, who in turn got their knowledge from the ancient Egyptians. The 7-pointed star inscribed within the Aubrey circle clearly locates the sarsen ring and frames the horseshoe of trilithons and bluestones. After identifying 7 as ISIS's secret number in New York City, I'm wondering if this 7-pointed star isn't the Star of Isis. The Egyptian civilization was at its height at the time of Stonehenge's completion, and although we have no archaeological evidence physically linking the two cultures, it remains an intriguing possibility. Avebury and Silbury Hill are a short distance from Stonehenge. Archaeologists say both of these monuments were built at the same time as Stonehenge, approximately 5,000 years ago. The late John Michell, said to be father of the Earth mysteries, and surveyor and researcher Robin Heath, discovered amazing relationships between all 3 Neolithic monuments, in terms of their precise locations upon the Earth. The base of Silbury Hill is 864,000 feet from the center of Stonehenge. The sun's diameter is 864,000 miles. The distance from 51 degrees north latitude to the latitude of Stonehenge measures 10.8 Egyptian royal miles. The mean radius of the moon is 1,080 miles. The latitude of Stonehenge is 17.28 miles from the latitude of Avebury. We learned in D.C. how 1728 symbolizes the cube. Avebury's latitude is precisely 360 divided by 7 degrees north. Dividing a circle into 7 parts yields the Star of Isis. The placement of Stonehenge, Avebury, and Silbury Hill encode the numbers of the sun, moon, cube, and heptagram star. Please measure these things yourself in Google Earth or with other methods. This hard metrological evidence should completely revise our understanding of prehistory.